Chase Johnson, your host here for the Liverpool Community Podcast. And once again, I'm joined by an interesting member from the community that I'm always looking forward to talking to. You know, like to feel that there are plenty of stories to be shared on this show. As you know, we like to talk to individuals who are doing something different or something positive in our communities. And this gentleman is one of them. I am joined here by Emy. I'm going to probably butcher this because I just corrected it. But either way, Emy Onuora.
Nice to meet you, Chase.
All right, did I get it right?
Yeah, you did. I've
Wow.
heard so much worse.
Okay. Well, no, thank you, Emy. Thank you for being kind about that. So Emy is the project manager for the Race Equality Hub at the LCR, or the Liverpool Combined Region Authority, I think it's called, yeah.
Yeah.
And how long you been doing that?
It'll be 3 years next month.
Wow,
Yeah.
3 years. Yeah. And obviously, it's always something where a government initiative or a community initiative feels that they have to be inclusive and engage in all communities and all that kind of stuff and everything. So, why was the Race Equality Hub set up?
That's a good question. So it emerged after the murder of George Floyd. So there were, within like many organisations, there was a bit of inward looking in terms of, how should we respond? And there was a recognition that, whereas, many organisations and companies tweeted, took the knee or tweeted symbols or something like that at the time, there was a recognition that the combined authority needed to do more than just, rhetorically state that it supported, the fight for social justice and racial equality. And so there was also recognition that the state in which the combined authority was at, there was a lot more they could be doing in terms of supporting race equality. So a race equality programme was established in June of 2020.
Yeah.
The first thing it did was just do a lot of evidence gathering to actually provide some data about the inequality that we kind of knew and understood.
Yeah.
But and what we found, I suppose, was that from cradle to grave there were kind of serious inequalities that had persisted for decades. Then I came into my role as project manager for the race equality programme that had been established in the June, and I was appointed in the December of 2020. So it's coming up for 3 years. And so I suppose in the interim period, we've been doing some engagement work with communities, asking them what we should do. All kinds of issues emerged from that, covering health, criminal justice, education, and we decided that we'd focus on employment and business support. And the reason for that is because the combined authority is responsible for kind of inward investment.
Yeah.
It's also responsible for the development of the city region's growth sectors, which are those sectors within the city region which we think ripe for growth, but also key to the city region's kind of future economic development. And so we felt that they were best placed to influence some of those developments and policies. And so we decided to focus on employment and skills. So we spent some time identifying what that might be, realised that we need to have a focus on diversifying workforces across the public, private and third sector, as well as making business, encouraging more Black, Asian, minority ethnic businesses to be established and to grow and to be sustained, and startups as well. Yeah, definitely. And so there needed to be a vehicle for that to happen. And so that vehicle ended up being the Race Equality Hub. So we drew down some funding. We had to develop a business plan. The business plan consists of an economic case as to why what's the need.
Yeah.
And you know, a management case and a business case for all of those things. We drew down somewhere in the region of £2.3 million to support the Race Equality Hub over the next 2 years.
Really?
And so now we're at the stage where, so we spent the last year or so since we drew down the funding, which was about a year ago, getting together the program director, who's effectively the head of the hub,
Yeah.
and getting that team in place and that wider team in place, and then trying to develop some of the services that the hub's gonna be delivering, and as it and that kind of pretty much brings us up to speed to today. The hub team came into place in September of this year. Right. So there are 4 individuals. We've got to recruit one more person in the new year, and that'll be the team in place. And their role is more of a kind of coordination role, rather than, so they're going to deliver about 20% of some of the services. The other 80% are going to be commissioned out to build capacity within communities. And so that's the kind of model that we're going to do. So the target is for the Race Equality Hub to support the economic advancement of Black, Asian, minority ethnic communities across the city region, and doing that through employment support and through, you know, support for business as well.
Well, you know, I mean, like, the thing about it is, I mean, I don't want this to be like a hard, like, question, like, or anything. It's just that when you mentioned about the business side of the focus, which is interesting because, like, I mean, you know, most people probably know, but probably don't think about it too much. But Tostiff, or LA, you know, where I'm from, where these areas you're talking about, Albert Dock is part of that. And like the thing about it is, when you have like the big bid that just came out, and everything, and you know, where we talk about redevelopment or businesses, you know, you go through Tostiff or LA, and you don't really see much. But Albert Dock you do, right? Or you know, like in the Baltic Triangle you do. And everything, and so it's great that like that the focus is around business and development and support, you know. But you know, where's the businesses in Tostiff in getting that support? Do you think?
So, what we know about business support more generally,
Yeah.
I can just generalize in terms of your question, is that there's two kind of in terms of business support, there are two kind of features of it, I suppose.
Yeah.
One is that those businesses we're talking about don't get the right type of advice, support, etc., at the right times, and so and there's loads and loads of business support services falling out of our ears. You know, the city region and you know and other places have got loads of business support. But they're not necessarily attuned to the needs and the challenges that you know, Black, Asian, minority, ethnic businesses face. So we need those services to be more attuned. We need mainstream services to be more attuned to the needs of minority, ethnic businesses, for one. Secondly, as well, we also know that in terms of funding, and that's the kind of engine room of any business, it needs, you know, investment. Black businesses just don't get the equal access to investments and finances that their white counterparts do.
But to also be fair, they also have to show up.
Yeah,
Because I do know that you guys do put you attend a lot of events, don't you? Like whether you put them on or you have stalls at events. And everything, and you're there to support local business, as you say. But then those business people have to come out to you. You know, like I think we were talking in a pre-talk about the LCR Freeport, stuff like that. You know, I mean, people. I mean, how do you think, suggestive-wise, that people can learn more about these opportunities that are on offer for them including what you're offering.
I think for something like LCR Freeport, don't forget every so often, every few years, there's a big development that's announced, which is going to bring thousands of jobs, and and we're going to redevelop this, and we're going to redevelop that, and everything else, and I always think of those things as being developments that are really going to support some of the big businesses that exist in and around the city region, or even nationally.
Yeah.
So I think, so if there's a big construction development, I think, it's the likes of Bovis or massive big construction who do big infrastructure projects. They're the ones who are going to benefit, and so on. And that, and so I think similarly, and the other thing that happens, either by accident or design, black businesses are always excluded from anything, any of those developments, and quite often they're not even at the table.
Yeah, or they're just creating their own, like say like a pace setters or something like that. You will have like something that is specifically just designed for them.
Yeah.
But then what will happen is that you're missing out on where the other major monies are.
Absolutely,
You don't attend that event. I don't want to be the only one there.
I don't want to be the only one there, and if I am the only one there, I'm sat next to, my little building firm is sat next to, the likes of Lang, O'Rourke's, and the big construction, and I'm not going to get a piece of the pie here. Yeah. So I think there's that feature of some of these big investment developments that have occurred in the past, so that when another one comes along, people just kind of think, well, that's not really for us. That's not really gonna have anything to do for us. And one of our jobs is to make sure that the Freeport development is because the other thing that these things do quite often is they say, well, we'll do some business, we'll do some consultation, but it's usually to tick a box. It's usually after all the big decisions have been made, and the best that smaller businesses in general get is a few crumbs. Yeah. Maybe a cleaning contract here and there, or security contract, or something of that nature. You might get what part of our job is to make sure that the Freeport, as a new city region development, is designed in such a way that it supports local businesses, it gives opportunities, and that it actually, draws upon the range of diversity that exists within both the city and the wider city region, to ensure that opportunities that become available don't just go to the usual suspects as they always do. Peel Holdings and all of those kind of groups as well.
Now, we're talking about businesses and stuff like that, but what about individuals? I mean, are there any opportunities for the individual to go down funding? Or
good question. There isn't. I mean, obviously, if you're a business owner and businesses come in all shapes and sizes, you can have some people do business on their own. Some people do it as a kind of side hustle. And maybe even a group of people might come together and develop their own kind of smaller business and take on other people. So in terms of individuals, we'd be looking on, businesses which are micro businesses to get access to the right finance and funding and business support. But also for people who aren't going into the business field and want to be employed, there's a whole range of things that we've got in that we want to do to ensure that the full range of talent that exists within the city region is utilised effectively. That so right from young kids in school who have got who haven't even thought of the range of job opportunities that may be available. Yeah. Let's say, for example, there's perennially been a shortage of kind of software engineers. Yeah. We need to kind of, impress upon, young kids that software engineering is an opportunity for them, and you need to take the right results and have the right motivation and take the right qualifications that'll enable you to progress into software engineering as a career.
Yeah.
So, but also, not just at entry level, we also want to make sure that, you know, people who want to access kind of leadership opportunities are able to do so. And that doesn't just necessarily mean, you know, CEOs, much as that's desirable as well, but also people who are leading in a whole range of things, in advocacy work or activism, or those kind of areas as well. So,
well, I mean, there are a lot of new things like coding classes now.
Of course.
For young people and everything else like that. You know, they do have that. But also too is just the fact that so just kind of like to swerve a little bit, you know, because when it comes again to the Race Equality Hub, because I'm pretty sure that you have like I won't call them town hall meetings. But
Okay.
You have like meetings with people
Summits.
in the community.
Yeah,
like,
summits we've been calling them.
What
Summits?
Okay,
Yeah.
I mean, but like it's been my experience. You know, a lot of times, the anger and passion comes out, and it reduces the chance for the results. What has been your kind of like thing around like when people? I mean, it's not like they don't have anything to complain about. I mean, everybody has the right to complain, but complaining is not enough when you want results and you want to. I mean, what is your?
It's a really interesting observation of yours on that score, I think, Chase. I think quite often, and you know, I can't disagree with you because obviously it's your observation. I've seen similar you know features of those type of meetings kind of play out in a similar way. And they can be negative because we focus too much time on talking about stuff that's gone wrong in the past without focusing on what we can fix and how we can move forward. And I think, but I think, you know, part of that is to do with a response to kind of, you know, decades of inequality and racial trauma and those kind of issues. And so those forums, by accident or not, form a kind of space where people can kind of, you know, not be healed by the trauma, but play out those kind of traumatic incidents that have happened to themselves, to family members, to people in their community, etc. So that's why it's quite often those forums kind of, I hate to use the word descend, but develop into that kind of you know, discourse. Yeah,
I mean,
good.
and I mean, because what I'm just trying to say is, it's like when we got classifications. You know, I mean, being black, we always have been from the '60s on. Well, even before.
Yeah.
You know, forget those words, but we've always been classified, right?
Of course.
You know, so you got the whole modern Bing community.
Of course.
But do you see? I mean, like, what do you think about the fact that are we actually reaching the other like communities? Like, because to me it seems like it just comes down to black versus white.
Yeah, that's a
And
really good
come
question.
Down to that. I mean, especially here where we have a strong Asian community, a strong
Absolutely.
Chinese community, that kind of thing. But or even Spanish. Well, maybe we don't have a strong one, but you know what I mean? It's kind of like.
You make a really good point, Chase. Do you know
I'm
what?
just wondering if that's something for race equality.
Yeah, no, absolutely. This city region is changing insanely appreciably since, you know, I was in my teens, for example, and first coming into the labour market, for want of a better word. That, you know, the city region's changed appreciably. Places that when I was a kid were no-go areas are now, you know, very ethnically and racially diverse as well. So they've changed out of all kind of recognition from my time. And I think what's important is that the hub supports all communities, all ethnicities, all those ethnicities who face discrimination.
Yeah.
So I know nationally, the Asian community is bigger than the black community nationally. So it's important to recognise that even within our city region, that there are, as you correctly pointed out, substantial Asian communities from the Middle East and and Southeast Asia, Chinese community, as you've said. Latin American community as well is growing, as far as I can tell. Lots of Brazilians as well as supplemented by newer arrivals of Africans from Zimbabwe, Nigeria, Congolese.
Oh, definitely, yeah.
Syrians, Afghans, Iraqis.
It's such a big vastness. It's like, why did it just come down to two particular groups?
So it's important. It's important that the hub is seen and actively engineers itself in such a way that it does support all of those groups as well, and that it's not just seen as, first of all, a black thing for a Liverpool 8 residents. Because that's not what it is.
No.
It's definitely so. Black communities in Southport. Really interestingly, I met there's a group in Southport who are part of the Windrush generation, who worked in a couple of factories in the Southport area, and now have kids and everything else, and they've just set up a kind of African Caribbean Heritage Society in Southport. So they were a community that I wasn't aware of up until relatively recently. So we need to think about how we support communities up in Southport who might be fairly marginalised and isolated. Similarly, in Halton and St Helens, there are communities there that similarly feel marginalised and isolated, but aren't getting opportunities as well. So I think it's important that the hub, part of the success of the hub will be to the degree to which it supports the range of communities across the city region.
Well, it's also like social media. I mean, does the hub have like a social media site or?
It does have a social media platform that's being developed at the moment. So it's got the platforms, but it hasn't really developed them. Its marketing and its promotional work will gather pace in the new year, and we'll probably have it's even got its own website at the moment, but it needs further development. It's essentially just a page, but it does need further development to make sure that it's interactive and it's user-friendly as well, and we need to think about what information is going to go on it and how it's going to be updated. We have one member of the team is going to be responsible for all of that kind of work.
So at least it's in the process and everything like that. I mean, also, I just also want to ask you a little bit about yourself, because I found it curious, in doing the research, that you had written a book. But it has just kind of like came back into, I guess, the public conscious because you just had an event on and everything. But this book is called Pitch Black, which was about black British footballers, which I'm pretty sure there's a lot of sports fans out there, can remember the time of kick racism out of football, and John Barnes and all that kind of stuff. So tell me about Pitch Black.
So that came out. I wrote that in 2016. So it's about 7-8 years old now. And what I did was I interviewed about 20 black footballers from right across the country. And just wanted to talk to them about their experiences of playing football and in particular the racism that they suffered. And what I wanted to do was kind of take a historical kind of context. So where it's set is round about the kind of early 1970s up to the present day, and it just kind of charted the development of the impact as well of black footballers on British football to be honest. And so one of the things is that since the professional era, which started in the middle of the kind of 19th century or the late 19th century, there's always been black footballers right throughout the whole history of professional football in this country. In fact, one of the first professional footballers is a guy called Arthur Wharton, who was born in Guyana. He was also a great athlete, could run 100 yards, I think it was, in those days, in under 11 seconds. And he was one of the first kind of professional footballers in the country. And we've had and there's always been a small number of professional footballers right throughout the kind of whole professional era, usually drawn upon its colonies. So people from Jamaica, well, the West Indies more generally, from South Africa, a guy called Albert Johansson. And interestingly, the first black guy to play for Celtic is a guy called Gil Scott, who's Gil Scott Heron's father.
Wow.
Played for Celtic, and in the 1950s, from Jamaica. And upon the end of his playing days, emigrated to the States, and his son was born there and became, famous, exceptional kind of musician. So there's been a kind of history throughout the kind of professional era of footballs, but where the 70s kind of start is because they're the kind of sons of the Windrush generation.
Yeah, of course.
And so that proved to be a kind of game changer just in terms of the numbers who were coming into professional football at that time. So what I wanted to talk to them about was what the book looks at is, their experience of racism in the game. So where it starts in the 70s, at the time of the 70s, one of the kind of key features of UK life for black communities was things like stop and search, things like the rise of the far right, the National Front, the British National Party, the rise of the far right. So in the 1970s, far right parties on a clear anti-immigrant kind of stance were getting 25% of the popular vote in by-elections and local elections and that kind of stuff. And so what I wanted to do was place football in this kind of historic context. It's not, we sometimes we think of it as just a leisure activity that has no bearing on the way the rest of the society operates. And so what I wanted to do was just talk to a number of footballers about their experiences. So what we find is, I interviewed people like Viv Anderson, who was the first black player to play for England, John Barnes, who people in this area will know very well, Paul Canavale, who was the first black player to play for Chelsea, had quite a horrendous experience, and also talk about how it was that you went from a stage where black footballers were regularly racially abused, 40,000 people racially abusing them and everything else, and they were forced to, by the circumstances of the time, to just accept it. To a situation now where most of that is now gone, but it's on social media. It's kind of
but then
on
also
social
to
media.
certain little areas, like you
Absolutely.
can still go around the north part of Liverpool, still see that kind of stuff. I think what's interesting about what you're saying though is that because it still is a relevant story to be read. As you brought it back into the consciousness, but when you say football, of course, obviously you're talking about soccer. Or
talking about soccer.
But when I hear football, I think about American Patriot
Of course you do.
football.
Yeah.
But the 60s, the 70s period that you're talking about was a very strong period for us as Americans.
Of course.
Because we had people like Fred Williamson and Jim Brown and all those guys
of course.
who went on to become heroes.
O.J. Simpson, whose name should not be...
All right, I was trying to stay here.
yeah.
But they went on to cinema.
Course,
they went on to stardom and everything, and they became heroes because they inspired the young people. So obviously these footballers you're talking about, even though they probably didn't go on the big silver screen, but they still inspired probably the local community? Would you say to the young people?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. It's some of the footballers who I interviewed later definitely said, people of the early days were definitely their inspiration. They were inspired by them. They were role models.
Yeah.
So people who came, the likes of Brendan Batson, Laurie Cunningham, Cyril Regis, who were kind of old West Bromwich Albion footballers. Viv Anderson's another one, the guy I mentioned earlier, who's the first player to play for England. The generations that came after them absolutely cite them as being people who inspired them to go into the game. And similarly, one of the reasons that Liverpool 8 is kind of one of the city's kind of hotbeds of football is partly because of the influence of, John Barnes.
Yeah.
South South Liverpool more generally is very much a kind of LFC kind of supporting area.
Yeah.
And so, so John Barnes, 60 odd caps for England, footballer of the year, player of the year, the best footballer of that particular generation, playing for Liverpool, and also, doing things like, going into the community, holding coaching clinics, going to awards nights, handing out prizes. He did have a presence within the community. And then also what happened is, as well as that, is you need a kind of grassroots infrastructure that also exists as well to maintain and sustain all of that kind of thing. So one of the reasons Liverpool 8 is began to produce, a whole load of footballers, not all of whom play for our local teams, but who've gone on to, have good careers in the game. You can probably trace it back to, much of that to kind of John Barnes's impact on the city and the wider city region as well.
Yeah. No, definitely. I mean, it still is something that I would encourage people to seek out and to look for. Pitch Black sounds like a really, excellent story that is more than just a sports story.
Yeah, it's more than just, this player scored these goals and played for England and did this. I did try and place much of it into kind of a historical context. So it's more of a story of the game's development from a black perspective more than anything else.
Yeah.
That's what it is.
So I asked you, since that was some time ago, were you working on anything new written-wise? And you were talking about you were working on a story around the race riots in 1919.
So, in collaboration with a colleague of mine, Madeleine Hennigan, who you know, we wrote a book on the 1919 race riots that took place across the country, but with a particular focus on Liverpool. So in 1919, not many people, appreciate this or know this. To be honest, there's always a sense that black community in the UK is post Windrush, and prior to the Second World War, there were long well established black communities that were focused on seaport areas. So Glasgow, Liverpool, Bristol, Cardiff, East London, North Shields, South Shields, South Shields. I think it was. I can't remember which Shields it was in the northeast. Were all areas which were quite racially diverse, and they were made up of seafarers and their families who would settle, marry, bring their wives and kids over, or in a lot of cases, single men who married local women, and developed communities. And so in 1919, just after the Second World War, there was I suppose I need to take it back to the wartime, to the First World War times as well. Is that because of the war effort, local males were asked, particularly if they were seafarers, went off to go into the Royal Navy. And what Britain did was draw upon its colonies and ask them to come over and help with the war effort. So black seafarers came over, worked in the Merchant Navy. and also worked in factories that were producing, products for the war effort, guns, munitions, etc., etc. So at the start of the war, the existing communities were supplemented by the addition of other people who came from West Africa, from the Caribbean, came to work, and then as soon as the war was over, they were essentially, some were literally sacked from the day the colour bar came up, and they were literally sacked, the day that the war ended, to be honest. And so what you found was all of those people, were in many cases kind of, on the streets, destitute, between a rock and a hard place, not able to have the means to kind of live here, but also didn't have the means to go back to their country of origin. Yeah. What happened, and the themes are kind of, you'll recognise these themes. What happened was that after the war, white servicemen came back, said all the blacks are taking our jobs, have took our jobs, and out of that developed a whole kind of racial tension, because they came back as well to a land supposedly fit for heroes, but had no work, high unemployment, lots of poverty, and they came back, and there was racial tension around the usual things, jobs and women. Yeah. So racial tensions emerged then, and then there were kind of literally race riots, started in Glasgow in January 1919, developed in all of those areas that I mentioned before as well. We had ours over the summer of 1919, and people will know the name of Charles Wotton, or Wotton, as we now know him to be, because we've been in touch with his family. Yeah, Charles Wotton was probably one of the first recorded racist murders that took place in the country, and he was murdered in 1919. Part of, we didn't call it Red Summer. I know that's my understanding of it, anyways, and kind of more of an American term, because there was similar developments with returning servicemen after the First World War, where returning servicemen, and right throughout the states actually, Chicago, Texas, were literally, some people were horrified that they were wearing these uniforms, that black people could have the temerity to wear these service uniforms, and literally lynched them there and then, strung them up there and then. So there were similar features going on in the States as there were in the UK as well. But obviously on a bigger scale in the States, because of the peculiarities of your home countries, racial, dynamics.
Yeah, that's a good word, dynamic. So how far are you with this story?
So no, that's been published. You can find that on.
What's
it's called. Oh my God! It's called Race War to Race Riots. Oh my God! I can't even. I've had a brain kind of freeze.
Race War to
Race Riots. Yeah, to Race War. 1919. We can find.
Basically, it's co-written with Madeline Hennigan.
With Madeline Hennigan,
like and everything, and then what we'll do is we'll put the name underneath.
Great.
Like that when Emy gives it to me.
Yeah.
Well, Emy, first of all, I want to thank you for your time.
Not at all. It's been a pleasure.
It's been a fascinating story and topic. We managed to swim around different things, and really appreciate that. And then, like I said, I hope people are inspired to go and check out more about either how to get involved with the Race Equality Hub or when they have upcoming summits.
So there's an upcoming summit on Wednesday, this Wednesday.
Oh, that'd be before we actually.
Okay. Oh, that's a shame.
There was a summit last Wednesday.
There was a summit last Wednesday. There was a summit last Wednesday in the Everyman. 300 people, 3,000 people, 3,000 people showed up.
Yeah.
And
do you have anything coming up at the end of the year or the new year?
I think there'll be. The idea for those summits is to hold them quarterly. So there'll be quarterly summits throughout the quarter. So every quarter there'll be a summit held in all the 6 boroughs of the city region.
Yeah.
So they're going to be we're going to have those as a kind of permanent kind of opportunity
Yeah.
to engage, not just with, black communities, but also other people who are kind of interested in working in this
We've
kind
already
of
said
space.
diversity is a pretty wide wheel.
Of course it is, yeah,
and
yeah.
stuff like that.
So the idea of the summit is to kind of engage with communities, but also get intelligence and information from people who want to maybe you've got somebody who wants to diversify their workforce or wants to promote something that, I was speaking to someone this morning who works in the field who works in the health field and has got a particular interest in promoting the dangers of prostate cancer to black men.
Well, there you go. That's a very important subject.
Very, very important subject as well. So, so I was talking to her about whether and while it's not the hub's role to kind of, there are people better placed than the Race Equality Hub to do that. But we want to be able to
stigma by talking about
we want to be able to reduce the stigma by talking about it. And we want to be able to promote, people to go and get screened, and to understand more about it, and to take action. My own father, his prostate cancer was a contributory factor in his death. So it's something close to my heart, and and it's something that affects black men across the country, and we just need to be, we need to have more discussions about these things. So, the hub won't, set up kind of screening, but we will, definitely support any of those initiatives and signpost people towards those things. But also, lots of things that are happening in the kind of, for want of a better term, the race equality space. We'd encourage people to come along to those events.
Well, we definitely encourage people to go along to those events as well. And everything. Once again, I would like to thank Emy Onuora for joining me here today on today's episode of the Liverpool Community Podcast. Please like and subscribe. Comment below as well. It's like, let's keep that conversation going and everything. This has been a good one. Thank you, Emy. And
thank you very much, Chase.
Now, we out of here. Good stuff.